Being an artist was always something that existed. That the term itself, I never occupied, but I was making from a very early age. And I never saw it separate from my own identity. It was always a part of who I was. My name is Eliza Cardenas. I'm a painter and a comic book artist. I am from San Jose, California. I work primarily in acrylic paint, watercolor, inks, color pencils, and graphite water-soluble pencils as well. I consider myself to be a memoir artist, so I use my lived experience as a first-generation Mexican-Peruvian-American to inform my practice. I think about where I've been, what kind of childhood I had, my parents' experiences, being both immigrants from Mexico and Peru, and how they've lived their lives here in the United States. As a memoir artist, it's going through family photos, conversations with my parents about our own family experiences, and then I start free writing, and then I formalize a script. I thumbnail it. I try to catch all the beats, the opening, the climax, the conflict, and the resolution. Then I go to my type pencils, and it's all about really formalizing what I'm going to do on the page. Then I go into my inks, and then close to the final stage is your watercolors, and then you do your text. I started collecting comics when I was 13 years old. I never expected to see myself represented in comic books, but what X-Men did was they explored the other. These were people who were born with mutant abilities and were ostracized or isolated from a mainstream culture and society. So they had to formalize their own community. And that's how they learned to be proud of themselves, right? To form their own positive identity. So as a young person growing up in an immigrant family, I saw that as my own experience, right? So during the 1980s, there was a lot of discrimination around Spanish-speaking people, and I witnessed a lot of that racism towards my own parents. So when I was reading X-Men, I was like, yeah, I understand what it means to be other. So I saw a lot of solace in reading comics at that time. So now I'm using my own experience in the comic book form and naming the otherness, naming what it's like to live in one of the most expensive cities in the nation and try to make it, right? As a family, as an individual, as an educator, as an artist, as a woman. I write for the person who feels alone. I write for community. I write for my parents. I write for the history that, our history that is not in history books, but is an important history of survival and finding pride in who we are. And I also write for people who don't understand what that's like. And maybe they'll find empathy in a story like mine.